Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to Wayzata Community Church, especially a warm welcome to you if you're visiting with us. I know that a lot of people brought friends tonight, which is a wonderful thing. My name is Danielle Jones. I'm part of the pastoral team here, and this is the fourth in a 4-week series we have had on justice conversations. We began the series talking about racial justice. We've also talked about housing justice. We've talked about disability justice. And tonight is our grand finale. I just told Ellie, you're the grand finale. She's like, oh, great. So Ellie Krug is here. We are thrilled to have her. This is your third time at Wayzata Community Church. And I asked Ellie how she wanted to be introduced, and she said, well, just read this. So I will. Ellie Krug's business card reads, writer, lawyer, human. I love that. She's a graduate of Coe College and Boston College Law School. She's one of the few attorneys in the United States to try to separate jury trials in separate genders. Ellen is a freelance writer for several publications and frequent lecturer on the life lessons learned during her gender journey. She presently serves as the executive director of a nonprofit organization. She's the parent of 2 adult children. Getting to Ellen is her first book. In just a moment, I'm going to invite you to welcome her. Before I do, I will tell you that we'll have some time for Q&A after Ellie presents. And when we do that, Dan and I will have a microphone. We'll make sure you speak into that because we record these series, and we have had a lot of people watch them, so we want to make sure they can hear you and your wonderful questions. But now, without further ado, please welcome Ellie Krug.
Thank you. Thanks for that wonderful introduction, Danielle, and thanks for showing people my book, which I brought copies of if you want to buy some. $20 cash, credit, or check, okay? I am thrilled to be back here. The other 2 other times I've been here, it has been such an incredibly welcoming community. And so when I saw the email about asking me to come back, I was like, oh, yes, absolutely. No hesitation on my part whatsoever. Are you hearing okay with the mic? Okay, all right. And so, so what am I going to talk with you about tonight? You know, it is, the title of the talk is, I've got to get it, LGBTQI2 plus justice in 2023, or rather the lack of it. And you know, I only have really about a half hour or 35 minutes to kind of give you the guts here, and then I'll take questions. So it's a very limited time to kind of give you the landscape of the way the world is right now as it relates to LGBTQ plus people, as it relates to justice, or the lack of it. Before I do anything else, though, I need to make sure I tell you this, okay? I recently was elected to the school board in Eastern Carver County, District 112. Thank you. It was a hard-fought election. I'll be happy to share about that if you want. But I need to make sure that everyone here understands I am speaking only as Ellie Krug, private human citizen tonight, and not as a representative of the Eastern Carver County School Board, okay? I just need to make sure. I've had to add that to every talk I give, wherever the talk is, because I don't ever want anybody to think that somehow what I'm speaking about here is something that the school board endorses or in any way. I mean, they know that I go out and speak, but we need to make sure that there's that separation. So thank you. So what I'm gonna do is tell you just a little bit about LGBTQ plus people. So like, what are the letters? So we're all on the same page. Because much of what's going on right now relates to transgender people, okay? I'm going to probably be a little heavy talking about trans people and all of that. And then what I'll do is, you know, I'll talk about some of the challenges. I'll talk about what currently is going on in the country. And then I'm hearing this crackling sound.
Oh my God. I think if we can flip that a little bit.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
There. And maybe, I wonder if you want to connect it to your turtleneck as well, then it'll kind of stay in the center.
Hold on, yeah, because I'm hearing crickling.
I know, it's kind of like when your clothes
The crickets aren't out yet. How's that? Is that better? Okay.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's still there, kind of. Hold on. Joel, we got crinkling. So it's, I'll tell you what, just give me the hand. Let's just do the handheld. We'll make it easy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll just do that. So, yeah, thanks.
Got it.
Thank you.
There you go.
Okay, all right. No more crinkling. Okay. But a couple of things before I really get into it. First, I'm presuming there are some LGBTQ plus people in the audience, and I just want to make sure that everyone understands I am no one special, all right? I mean, all that I am is simply a survivor of the human condition. It's just that my survivorship is far more public than it is for most people. Let's just deal with the elephant in the room. I look like a chick. Please, nod your heads vigorously, okay? But I sound like a dude. I know that, all right? Okay? But all of you, everyone in this room is attempting to survive the human condition. And, my lived experience is really no better or greater than anybody else's. Everyone in this room has a lived experience, and I want to respect that, all right? Okay. Secondly, if I talk about anything that makes anybody uncomfortable, I'm sorry about that. But there are some realities about what's going on in America right now as it relates to LGBTQ plus people, which are horrible. They really are, okay? And lastly, I will take questions, but you can ask me, if you want, you can ask me questions as we go hot. That's okay, all right? That's fine. All right, so let me give you kind of the landscape as it relates right now to LGBTQ plus people. Last fall, Gallup came out with a poll. And the poll found that Gallup does, they do great polling. And what they found was that as of their polling at that time, 7.1% of all Americans across all ages identify as LGBTQ+. Okay? And that number, I guarantee you, has been creeping up over the last 30 years. Now, is that simply because there are a whole lot of straight guys seeing men kiss each other and they're like, hey, I want to try that? No. It's just because more and more people are brave. They've come out, they're visible, and it's causing other people who are afraid. Now, let's put a pin in the word fear, because that is a constant as it relates to LGBTQ plus people, okay? Fear, but more and more people, they see people who are living authentically, and so they just decide, I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to come out and be who I am, all right? Now, at the same time, Gallup found that 20% of Generation Z humans, so these are humans born between 1995 and 2012, 20% of them, who are turning adults. So it's, not like they're not like polling 4-year-olds, okay? But 20% are identifying as LGBTQ+. Okay? Think about that. Now, is that because, kids are seeing it on TV and they're like, hey, I want to do that? I will tell you right now, I think that there's always some element of social contagion, okay? Some element of experimentation. But hey, who here wasn't in college and had a few too many drinks with their girlfriend and decided, hey, I want to see what it's like to kiss a girl, right? So some people are nodding, but don't worry, okay. But think about that. And again, that number's going to go up, all right? And that's, my theory is that sexual identity is on a continuum, like way over here, way on the left, we got gay people. Over here on the right, and that's intentional left and right. Over here on the right, we got very straight people. I happen to believe, actually, the vast majority of people are somewhere in the middle. I really do, okay? It's just that we're afraid. We're afraid to let anybody know that, all right? And I also believe the same as it relates to gender. So it was Pew, not Gallup, but Pew recent poll found that 5% of Americans identify as transgender or non-binary. And I'll get to some definitions in a second here. So think about that. I mean, we have, what do we have? 330 million people in America. So 5%, now remember, it took me 4 years to get through 9th grade math. 5% though is what, 15 million people? You know, give or take? I mean, that's a lot of people. That's a whole lot more people than some states have people. And so there are a lot of LGBTQ plus people in America, and there are going to be more, simply because people are getting brave. Now, let's go through what the alphabet is, just so we're all on that same page. So, LGBTQI2 plus. L stands for lesbian. G, thank you. G, feel free to chair. G stands for gay. B stands for bisexual. LGBT, I gotta keep going in my head. T stands for transgender, okay? Now, also within that are non-binary humans. So non-binary folks are people who do not identify as either male or female. They simply identify as human. And they are the folks that use the pronouns they or them, or ze or they, or I can't keep track of all the pronouns, okay? But we put them under the kind of the umbrella of transgender, although there's separation for sure. Okay, LGBTQ, Q stands for queer or questioning. All right, now 5 years ago, I did an interview on Mississippi Public Broadcasting. Believe it, Mississippi Public Broadcasting. It was a legal show emanating out of the rare book room of the John Grisham Library in the law school at University of Mississippi Law School, okay? And they put me on, and I was supposed to talk about legal topics, but the first question I got from the interviewer was, Ellie, tell us what the letters mean in LGBTQ+. And I got to the Q, and all the lights lit up on the board with people calling in, and we never got past it. We never got past past talking about it, because people are like, queer, I don't like that word. That's, and we've got people who would be of my generation, where the word queer evokes pain because it used to be a weapon. It was a weapon used against LGBTQ people, pre-Stonewall. Stonewall, for those who don't, is Stonewall riots happened in late June, June 28th to the 30th, July 1st of 1969 in New York City. And that's credited, Stonewall Inn was a LGBTQ bar, the police raided it, and it's really not the first time, but the first time that ever stuck where queer people fought back against the police, okay? And so that's when, at any rate, Q stands for queer. Now, for our younger people, they love it. So in this thing in Mississippi, I've got a caller telling me, I hate that word, it's bad, and then I got another caller saying, I just love that word. It describes me perfectly, And so, at any rate, Q is for queer, but also / questioning. And that means I may be on the alphabet, but I don't know for sure. I need to figure it out, okay? And we give humans space to do that. Okay, LGBT, Q, all right. And then we have I, that stands for intersex. The old phraseology was hermaphrodite. These are humans who are born with indicia of both genitalia when they're born, okay? In the old days, the doctors decided what this person was going to be. Today, in contemporary medicine, at least in countries that have contemporary medicine practices, everybody's like, we'll wait and see what the brain says, and then we'll go back and have surgery for this person. The two stands for two-spirit from the native or indigenous community, where people they identify as both genders, or they're transgender. And I don't want to speak for the native community beyond that, but I will tell you that transgender people are revered in many of our, tribal nations. So, and then the plus at the end is for all kinds of other identities that we, that don't get on the alphabet. So, for example, sometimes you'll see P, which stands for positive, for HIV positive, all right? Or you'll see A, which stands for ACE, which are folks who do not have a sexual desire, okay? And by the way, I can't keep track of everything, so just be aware. All right, so those are all the alphabets, all right? Alphabet letters. Now, I do want to talk about something that you experienced, although I've acknowledged it already, and that was that this does not match, okay? That the appearance does not match the voice. And let me tell, why is that important, okay, for the LGBTQ plus community? It is important because it's called passing. So if I have any, do I have any students here of American history, like recent American history? Okay, so you may recall in Jim Crow South, and by the way, Jim Crow North, the concept of passing was the extent to which very light-skinned African Americans, black folks, very, very light-skinned, could pass for white. And they could escape a lot of the ravages of Jim Crow. They could go sit at a restaurant they wanted to. They could go use what restroom or water fountain they wanted to. Well, in the LGBTQ community, the subject of passing is the extent to which no one would ever be able to guess that you're LGBTQ+. Now, as it relates to transgender people, passing is the extent to which no one would ever guess that you were assigned a different gender at birth, okay? So, can we all agree if I don't open my mouth, I pass 100%? Again, not vigorously, okay, all right? Okay, but as soon as I open it up, I mean, we're down in the 30% range, okay? Although, and some of you have heard this joke before, but I'm going to make it again, okay? Not everyone gets it about me. There are half a dozen older women in Bemidji, 4 are 70, 2 are pushing 80. They just think I smoke 5 packs of cigarettes a day for 25 years. They've got no idea about me whatsoever. But this passing thing is incredibly important because it leads into injustice. Because we do have our very effeminate men, all right? We do have our very kind of, masculine women, who identify as lesbian, or effeminate men who identify as gay. We have certainly our non-binary humans who very often are very androgynous looking in the way they are, and we've got, people with colored hair and piercings and tattoos, which I think is all quite lovely. But all of those things tell straight cisgender people that I'm in the presence of somebody who is other. And that, of course, outright leads to discrimination and injustice. Not that we're going to get into it, but I mean, just last night, I'm part of a committee that advises the Carver County Mental Health Agency. It's called a local advisory council. So everyone, even here in Hennepin County, there's a local advisory committee for your mental health agency. And I've been pushing for, so I am telling you about it. So I'm pushing for the creation of the very first LGBTQ plus youth support group in Carver County. There is no such support group in Carver County right now. So I'm pushing for it, and I'm trying to get this committee to help get the commissioners to agree that it's a good idea. And we had a vote last night, and so just to let you know how this works, because this doesn't work, we had a vote, and one of the members of this committee, now remember, this is about mental health, supporting mental health, and one of the members of the committee, as we were voting, said, I'm not going to vote for anything that he says, that he proposes. And I said, no. I said, hold on, it's she or her. She said, no, you are a he. You're a man. I don't care what you say. And I will never agree to anything you want to do. You have an agenda. Okay, now, just bear in mind, I'm good. Okay, it's all right. But that, see, I share that example with you. By the way, we voted, and it's on the proposal hopefully is on its way, okay, to get this thing created. Thank you. But I share that with you because that's what this person latched onto. My voice, I don't pass, and thus, of course, I'm not a woman, for that reason, okay? So this passing is important. And when I go and I speak out in rural areas, I talk about passing because I tell my audiences that, you know, if we have 100 people in the audience, okay, now remember those stats, right, that I said to you? If we have 100 people in the audience, I say, you know what? The odds here are that somebody here is LGBTQ+, but you don't know it because they pass. And they're afraid. So I'm going to unpick the pin. Fear. Fear is a constant within this community. So large community. I'm going to start using the word community because it's easier to say. Fear is a constant. What are we afraid of? Now here in Wayzata, you're urban, part of Hennepin County. You know, I'm sure we've got a lot of people who go into the city, all of that stuff. Here, being LGBTQ, being part of the community, for many people, no big deal, okay? It's not such a big deal. But as we get out of urban areas, and this is the story across America, and we get to places where there are a certain past candidate who just put his hat in the ring again, flags all over the place, okay? Not to get political, but I'm sorry I have to get political to do this talk. You know, there's great fear about being who you are, about anybody finding out about who you are. And the fear is, first, it's going to affect my relationships. I'm going to lose people who are in my circle, like family members, or dear friends, or my employer, or my church, if the truth comes out about me. So they're afraid of losing those things. They're afraid of losing their job, although technically in America right now you cannot be fired, according to the Supreme Court in a decision that came down in the summer of 20, you cannot be fired because you're LGBTQ+, okay? All right, but nonetheless, people, you know, there's all kinds of things that happen when people are told that they're losing their jobs. So they're afraid of that. They're afraid on a more granular level of being hurt. Because LGBTQ people do get hurt. I mean, physically. People beat us up. Sometimes people kill us. Transgender women, particularly black transgender women, Latino transgender women, have a high incidence of being murdered because of who they are, because the communities they are a part of are even far more tolerant than white cisgender, you know, Christian communities. And so we're afraid of that, you know, and a lot of this is also age-related. So I'm in my mid-60s. I got a lot of perspective. Got a lot of grit. Like last night, it's like went over my shoulder. I did not like go home and like, oh, I'm horrible, you know. But I always talk about the 14-year-old transgender girl in Alabama. In a state where there are no legal rights, well, I'll come to that in a second, and who has no perspective, you know, who doesn't understand that she has grit or resiliency, and then she's got the state saying she can't play sports, the state saying you can't go see a doctor, can't get what's called gender-affirming care, which I'll describe in a second, the state that says you are less than worthy. I mean, what does she have? What does she think? And so there's that kind of fear, and it's the fear that it'll just continue to get worse. I talked to a young transgender man last week in Arizona. He wanted some advice about law school and where to go to law school, and he calls it the doom factor. You know, it's what next state is going to pass a law? You know, what's next going to happen in Arizona where he was located? And so there is that, and you have to understand this thing about fear because, you know, it is real. It is real. And it affects people greatly. Okay, now, let's talk about the landscape for the country. So right now, as I speak to you, there are 26 states in America that protect LGBTQ plus people. 26. So that means there are 24 states that don't. And and also DC is 26 plus DC. There are 24 states that protect transgender people. So for example, Wisconsin and Indiana, they protect lesbian, gay, and bisexual people, but they don't have legal protection for transgender people. Okay? It's just the way they set it up. And part of this also is, back when laws started to get passed in the 90s, transgender people weren't very visible. You know, it was not, we were not as, certainly as visible as we are now, and we certainly weren't the lightning rods that we have become. There have been, and if you look at anything in the handout, the page to go to is page 4, for me to give you the landscape. So, and page 4, and Danielle, it's okay to, you have this in a Word document, I think. If not, I'll send it to you in Word, and you can share it so people can click on the links, okay? Because if it's PDF, you can't do that. So I've given you the links of where this comes from. But as I stand with you right now, there are more than 320 anti-LGBTQ bills that have been introduced into state legislatures across America. That includes 4 anti-LGBTQ bills introduced in Minnesota. Okay? And so, and so now I really do need to talk about transgender people. So the way that it works if you are transgender, I'm going to come back to all the stuff that's happening. The way that it works if you're transgender is that your brain does not match your body. And I know for some people that's like, how could that be? Okay? But we have already, as a society, for the most part, gotten there. Because who here accepts lesbian and gay people? Raise your hand. Okay? Well, you've already gotten there about the brain not matching your body. Because if you are born, can I say penis and vagina? Is that all right? Okay. All right. Too late. Yep, there you go. Okay? Bandit pulled off. If you're born with a penis, okay, in theory, all right, your brain, right, is supposed to be attracted to someone with a vagina. But we as a society have come to accept the idea that the brain, okay, that the brain can be attracted to other people with penises, okay, which doesn't match the way that the brain is supposed to be with the body, in theory. We've come to accept that. So it's not much of a difference to think that my brain doesn't match my body with what I've got. Okay? It's not that much of a jump. All right? And so for transgender people, there's this thing called gender identity. And if your brain does not match your body, the older that you get, you start to experience a thing called gender dysphoria. And that is a very intense feeling of discomfort, and discomfort is really not the right word, but it's a very intense feeling of unease, of frustration, and trust me, because I experienced this for decades, of the fact that this is not right. Now, gender-affirming care, which you've been hearing about, yes? Gender-affirming care is where younger transgender folks, so people as young as, well, certainly with therapy and counseling, you know, children as young as 4 or 5 years old, but where as puberty is coming, where young trans people go and see endocrinologists or general practitioners, and they start to prepare for the onset of puberty as a way, because as puberty comes in, the dysphoria gets more intense for somebody. If you think that you're a boy, but were assigned female at birth because you have a vagina, if you know you're going to get your period, that's going to make you far more uncomfortable, because it's far more inconsistent with what your brain says you are. And so the idea is to help delay, okay, the onset of puberty so that younger transgender humans can
can make sure that this is who they are, right? We give them a chance to figure things out. And then, if that's the case, then you deal with it as they are adults, either through surgery or through some other use of other medicines, okay? And the same is true with transgender girls, okay? Somebody assigned male at birth, you know, they're going to get puberty. And so I just tell everybody, the value, so will you listen to me? The value of gender-affirming care is, will you listen to me? Do you hear this? Let me just tell you, I mean, I joked about it earlier, but let me just tell you, almost every day when I go somewhere, I am reminded that I am other. You know, somebody else, you know, I'll have a hot chocolate, will you, at Caribou, and you know, they'll tell me it's $3.38. They'll say, here you go, and they look at me, okay? You know, I was out with a friend a couple of months ago. We were having dinner somewhere. We had sat down, getting, you know, nothing had happened yet, and she and I are, you know, sitting there, and the server comes over and says, hello, ladies, how are you tonight? And my friend says, oh, just fine. And I said, oh, I'm good too. She literally spilled the water she was pouring as soon as she heard my voice. You know, and I try to date men. Try is the operative phrase, and this just scares the heck out of most men. I mean, most men are scaredy cats. They really are. But you knew that. Many of the women in the room knew that already. So what gender-affirming care will do for transgender girls is keep this from happening and give them a different voice. And this also puts me at risk. I mean, if I say the wrong thing at the wrong place to the wrong people, this voice puts me at risk. So, all right, so that's some of the background there about as it relates to transgender people. Now, what is happening across America doing that? And what are the bills? What do they consist of? Well, first of all, there are 18 states right now that have banned transgender children, primarily transgender girls, from competing in public sponsored, public-funded sports. So this would be from kindergarten through senior year public university, banning them from participating in sports because of the fear that it's mainly, again, transgender girls, that it's really a man, really a boy who's participating against girls, and it's going to give our girls a disadvantage, and they're not going to be able to get their college scholarship for fencing or for swimming or for whatever else it is. Okay, so we've got 18 states, we've got more states. By the time the legislative season's over, I'm sure it's going to be more than 20 states that will have banned them. Okay, so we got that going on. We have a number of states that are passing bills to prevent transgender kids and non-binary kids in public schools from using facilities, restrooms, or locker room facilities that align with their gender identity. We have a number of states that are now starting, it's the new movement, starting to ban transgender people from utilizing any public facility that does not align with their gender, the gender they were assigned at birth. So we're talking restrooms, we're talking locker rooms, we're talking pool changing areas, we're talking all of that stuff. Oklahoma wanted to go one step further, and they wanted to ban, and I think they're going to do it, they wanted to ban anybody younger than 26 from getting gender-affirming care. The idea is that your brain isn't fully formed until you're 26 years old. Okay? Now, I think what's going to happen next, not this legislative season, but certainly 2024, if the election cycle goes wrong, and certainly in 2025, I think that there are going to be just outright bans of anybody being transgender in any way in which the government has anything to do with it. So my fear when it was the Trump administration was, well, what did the Trump administration do? So first of all, the Trump administration almost immediately deactivated all of our transgender soldiers. Okay, the president issued an order, said anybody who's transgender, you can't be in our military anymore. That affected 15,000 people. So think about people who were, getting to their 20 years to be able to retire. They get drummed out of the military. The Trump administration issued orders saying that doctors, medical professionals, could discriminate against LGBTQ plus people. Okay, because there had been, under the Affordable Care Act, there's a provision that says you cannot discriminate on the basis of gender or sexuality in your affirming of care. So the Trump administration removed that, and they said, I remember vividly when that order came down. It came down in August of 2020. I was despondent over that. I was despondent, and so that was so that medical professionals could discriminate. What I was ready for them to do was to take away my passport, because my passport, has Ellie Krug on it, female, does not align with my gender identity. But I think that if the politics go the wrong way, I see that happening. I see a federal law that would say that states cannot issue driver's licenses for transgender people. You already saw in Texas what the governor in Texas has done is he's ordered up or his Attorney General, Ken Paxton, the dynamic duo, ordered up all the state agencies to identify the number of transgender people they have in the state on the basis of how gender markers were changed on driver's licenses in Texas. And in Florida, of course, we've got Governor DeSantis, who is ordering all of the state universities that treat transgender people, trying to get all the data. How many trans people have you treated? What kind of treatment have you done? How long you've been doing it? All of that stuff, to get that data, in turn, I think, to use against transgender people in a variety of ways. And so, and we can just go down the list on page 4 of all the things that are happening. Right now, bullet point number 4 says 5 states ban gender-affirming care. Since I created this document, we have now at least 6, because yesterday, Kristi Noem in South Dakota signed a bill banning gender-affirming care. Okay? You can see the stats here about the percentages of LGBTQ youth who are bullied in the schools. And this affects mental health of these students. This is why I'm working on having a support group in Carver County, so that our queer kids have a space where they can just be themselves and have mutual support. But there's also, I've got this reference to this PLOS One study, which what they did is they looked for, in the states where the states passed anti-LGBTQ laws, particularly anti-transgender laws, they researched the data to see how internet searches for the words suicide and depression increased. And they found that there's an incredible correlation for those states where those laws were passed, where those searches increased. And that makes sense, because the rate of suicides for LGBTQ people, but particularly transgender people. So for transgender humans, our attempted suicide is 40, not 4, 40 times the rate for cisgender non-trans people. And it's because our young people, they don't have the support. They don't know that people will care for them. They just believe that it's hopeless. And it's easy to see how they believe they're hopeless. Because if you live in South Dakota, the state above you, North Dakota, is passing laws against you. The state below you, Kansas, is passing laws against you. Oklahoma, you can go all the way from the Canadian border to the Mexican border without encountering a state that has any protection for LGBTQ people. And now they're taking away rights. And so if you are feeling that I am painting this dismal picture as it relates to LGBTQ people in America right now, you're getting the right message, because it is dismal. And And will you think about this, okay? We have states passing laws targeting humans to take away rights, and no one is doing anything about it. In 2016, when North Carolina passed HB 2, which prevented transgender people from utilizing public restrooms, the country was up in arms. Do you remember that? You know, I mean, they took away the NCAA finals out of North Carolina. You know, you had all these music stars saying, I'm not going to go and do shows there. You had all of this uproar. What has happened now? I'll tell you what's occurred. We're tired. Our country is fatigued. And it's getting to the point where what we are creating in America is a sea of red with islands of blue. Shall we talk about Dobbs and women's reproductive rights? I mean, they're all tied in. It's all tied in. It's about control. It's about retaining power. About retaining power for white, straight people. Sorry about being so blunt, but that is really what it is. And so, now, Minnesota. So all of you, I want you to give, right now, I want you to give the state of Minnesota a round of applause. Will you do that for me, please? Because Minnesota has protections up the wazoo. We got state protections for LGBTQ plus people, but we've got also individual ordinances and cities and towns that also have protections for LGBTQ plus people. It is wonderful. I will tell you, this is why I live here. I came to Minnesota because it was safe for me. I stay in Minnesota because it's safe for me. When I talk to young LGBTQ people across the country, I tell them, you know, for example, with this college student, college student going to law school that young trans man I spoke to last week, he has a free ride to 2 law schools in Philadelphia, and he's got a free ride to one in Chicago, and then a partial ride to another one in Chicago. I mean, very smart human, and very, you know, good for him to be able to get the free rides. But we talked about the fact that Pennsylvania does not protect LGBTQ plus people. Now, Philadelphia's got some laws, some ordinances, but the state of Philadelphia does not, there's no state law like here in Minnesota, no state law in Pennsylvania. And then I said, but you know what? Illinois does. Illinois's got all kinds of protections. So does Chicago. And I asked him, and understand this, because the people who want to marginalize my community apparently either don't understand it or they don't care. But across America right now, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of conversations along this line that are occurring between families and friends and loved ones and LGBTQ people. And the conversation goes this way as it went last week with this trans person. Where do you want to put your roots down? Do you want to go and invest in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, in a state where once you get out of law school, and you leave Pennsylvania or Philadelphia, because you got to stay in Philadelphia for the rest of your life, but let's say you get a job in Harrisburg, do you want to go and then have to deal with the fact that you don't have legal rights? So in Pennsylvania, you know, he could go get the job in Harrisburg, he could have to go get an apartment in Harrisburg, and the landlord in Harrisburg say, you're transgender, I'm not going to give you an apartment. And that would be perfectly legal in Pennsylvania to do that. And I said, or do you want to go to Illinois? You know, do you want to go there where you have rights, where you're going to be protected? You know, where it doesn't matter if you go to Rockford or Springfield or whatever, you're going to have legal rights. Do you want to do that? And as we talked about, he's like, you know what? I think Chicago's where I'm going. That kind of conversation is happening. Can you imagine right now the conversation in Florida with young people? Can you imagine what that is? And how many conversations are occurring at the dinner table in Minnesota with the young, you know, 18-year-olds like, I'm going to Florida. I want to go to Florida State. How many conversations across the table parents are having, particularly with girls, right? About, do you really want to go to Florida? Do you really want to go down there with the way that atmosphere is? I mean, this is even for straight, because our straight young kids, this stuff I'm talking about, very important. Even if they're not LGBTQ, I guarantee you they got friends who are, and I guarantee you they're allies. I guarantee you that they want their friends to be able to live just as they live. And so these conversations, so what I predict in this sea of red and islands of blue is the blue states are going to get all the good people. I do. We're going to get the ones who have imagination. We're going to get the ones who want to live in places that are diverse and inclusive. We're going to get people who are builders, people who are socially minded. We're going to get those people. I do. And the red states, they're just going to get redder. So, now that's the case unless we are willing, and I'll shut up and take questions in a second. That's the case unless we're willing to do one thing. And you know what that one thing is? Talk to each other. Get past our fear of other. Get past our fear of, oh my God, I can't believe they voted that way. And sit down and have a conversation. Now, Kristi Noem did this yesterday, signed the bill that not only bans gender-affirming care, but prevents trans kids from using restrooms and locker room facilities. Now, in 2016, there was not the gender-affirming care, but the ban on facilities the legislature passed. Do you know that? They passed the bill. And the governor, Dennis Daugaard, was set to sign it the next day. But somebody convinced Dennis Daugaard to do something incredible. Somebody convinced him to sit with 3 transgender people and get to know them. And so on the night before he was supposed to sign the bill, he sat with 3 trans people. I think one was a teen and then a couple of adults. They sat and talked for 2 hours. First time Dennis Daugaard had ever talked to a transgender person. First time ever. He got done talking to him. He went to bed, went home, went to bed. He got up the next morning. He said, I'm not signing the bill. He said, because they're humans. And it's wrong. Now, we need to do that. We need to have those conversations across America. So last night, as this person was saying to me, you're a man, not a woman, do you know what I said back? I said, I'll be happy to meet with you and sit down and talk. I don't think there will be a taker on that, but that was a sincere offer on my part. So we need to do that. Now, if we do that, this ocean of red, it will fade. We don't do that, it's just going to get redder and redder, I fear. Okay, all right. If I have you depressed, sorry. I also want you to know, okay, that our young LGBTQ plus people, and I go and I speak to a lot of schools. They have what are called gay straight alliances or gender sexuality alliances. I go and speak to a lot of young people. I want you to know that our young people, our young LGBTQ plus people, are incredible humans. They are brave, they are resourceful, they are smart, they are beacons of hope for us. And notwithstanding the onslaught of everything, they're positive about the world. They are. What you can do is this. If you know somebody who's LGBTQ plus, but particularly if they're younger, but even if they're adults, will you, so what is it? It's 7:26 now. Not tonight, but you can do it tonight. But no later than tomorrow night, will you do me a favor? Will you tell them that you care about them? Will you tell them that they matter? That they have value? That they are worthy? And when I say will you tell them, please do not send them a text. Don't send them an email. Call them. Or talk to them face to face, because texts get lost, emails get deleted. But doing this, and if you could write them a note and say that to them, because notes are forever, please do that. Okay, because that is what they need to hear. That's your way of valuing them. Okay, I'll take questions now. Do you have another one of these, or is this the? Oh, you do. Okay, great.
Ellie, I really wanted to call out just two things. We've found some themes in all of these speakers, regardless of the topic, when we talk about justice. And the themes, I think, have come through loud and clear in what you have shared. One is justice is uncomfortable. And I think you called it out to us. It is uncomfortable to hear what you have just shared with us, to hear that the rights are really at risk. And you've also given us a step forward. And the other thing we've heard is it's relational. It's knowing people. It's sitting down. So thank you so much. And I'd be curious, can you tell us, what do people, LGBTQ+, what do you need? What are some of the supports needed to have the courage to step into who you really are, like you've had the courage to do?
I think it goes back to there being someone in a person's life who believes in them. Now, this is not much different than it is for any other young person, that they have somebody who's their role model, somebody that is their rock. But for LGBTQ+ people, I think it's also having an understanding that maybe you don't understand all of it, but you understand some of it. And a willingness to take the journey with them, Because there are some people like, I don't want to hear about this. I love you, but I don't want to hear about it. Okay? Well, what that does is say, I love you if you're a certain way, but the way that you are right now, I don't want that to be part of my life. We all want to be accepted, don't we? Yeah. Don't we all want to feel whole and we don't have to, compartmentalize things off for people? I was having coffee with somebody this morning, and some woman came up to me who said, Ellie, I voted for you, and oh, that's great. And she went on to tell me about her transgender granddaughter. So, signed male at birth, but she was gender specific, pronoun specific, yet kept using the right name. I will never forget, I was out in, I was, just go on and on, Ellie. Okay. I was in Norfolk, Nebraska last spring. Norfolk, Nebraska, population 25,000. Fourth largest city in Nebraska. I spoke at a community college, and I gave a Transgender 101 talk. And when it was question and answer time, there was this older woman. I would guess that she was probably 80 years old, who stood up and talked about her grandchild in Hawaii, and how the child was transitioning, and how she was trying to work on the pronouns and on the name, and you could just see that she was struggling. She very much wanted to love this child and be supportive, but she also, it's my grandchild and all that history. I'll never forget. It was so touching to the audience that she stood up and asked about that at that age. And anybody, at whatever age you are, you can love whoever it is. You can. I am going to tell you, I have a newsletter called The Ripple that goes out to 9,000 people every month. I'm going to pass around the sign-up sheet. If you want to sign up for it, great. If you don't have to, okay? But people love my newsletter. All right, what other questions do we have? Being mindful of my time. Yep, there you go. Thanks, Danielle.
I know you talked about the disconnect between, the look and the sound and all of that stuff. As more children get the opportunity to have gender-affirming support as they grow up, do you think that will help alleviate those issues to some degree, the whole issue of passing? I think of I Am Jazz, which I watched every episode of because
right.
I wanted to learn. And I think their family is just amazing. They let their child actually transition from 2 years old almost. They knew that Jazz was not a boy. He was indeed a she.
So yes, I think that as more young humans are affirmed, that they, this is real. The biggest issue that we face is that people believe this is a choice, that you don't have to do this. And the reason for that with transgender people is because it takes work on your part. So if somebody comes out as lesbian or gay, I mean, they don't change their name. They don't change their appearance. Well, a gay man, he might start wearing more fashionable clothes. That was a joke. Okay? But there's no work on your part. You don't, I mean, it's still John. It's still he. You don't have to do anything. With transgender people, it's like you got to do new name, new appearance, you got new pronouns, all of that stuff. And it's much more in your face, not intentionally, but it causes a lot of people to believe you didn't have to be that way. I mean, if I had a buck for the number of people who said to me, "Are you sure you're really a woman? You look so happy as a guy." You know? I mean, I lost my my ex-mother-in-law. I mean, I really loved her, but she said, "I don't ever want to see you again. You made a choice to be you, and I'm going to choose not to see you ever again." You know, and so, yes, but look at what's happening in America. We're taking away gender-affirming care. We're taking that away from them. So we're going to have way more trans girls that are going to sound like Ellie Krug. You know? God. Pardon? The potential is there, absolutely. Yeah, other questions, sure. Go ahead. Thanks, Danielle.
I would be interested in your own personal story. What kind of a family did you grow up? Do you have any brothers and sisters, and how were you treated, and when did you know that you were going to be not a boy?
Okay, so what is my personal story? You know, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s when the idea that your brain couldn't match your body and you could do something about it was impossible, okay? And so, but when I was 11 years old, and I'm not proud of it, but I did it, and it was quite exciting, I started going into my sister's bedroom when nobody was home, trust me, opening up her underwear drawer, stripping off my boy clothes, and putting on the very prettiest pair of camisole and panties. They were yellow flowers. I still remember this day. And from the front, when I looked in a mirror, it didn't work. But when I looked at a mirror like this, I looked like a girl. And a shot of electricity would go through my body. Because that's what I was. But because in the 70s, 60s and 70s and 80s, this, you know, so I suppressed. And it's called suppression. So I tried to stay a man, stay a boy, stay a man for 40 years until I had a moment of truth. And maybe that's another talk to bring me back for, okay? Where I realized that I would lay on my deathbed one day and really hate myself for not having been braver to be me. And so at that point, I mean, I was married. I had married my high school sweetheart. We were together for 33 years before it fell apart. I had my own law firm. I was employing people. We had 2 beautiful daughters. We had a house in the best neighborhood. I mean, I was living not the American dream. I was living the American greatest possible dream. And I knew that if this came out, I would lose all of that. And I did. It all turned out just fine. Everything is okay. My wife remarried, and she's happy, so that took care of a lot of guilt that I had. I lost a daughter for a while, but she came back. I lost a sister. I have a brother and a sister. I lost my sister because she was mourning the loss of her big brother. But she came back, and we're good, like real good, you know. And you know, and when I'm a student of Dr. King and Robert F. Kennedy. Because I was 11 years old when they were murdered. How many people here were alive when Dr. King and Bobby? Oh, look at this crowd. Oh, why should I be surprised? Okay. Well, you may remember. Do you remember what they talked about? They said we have an obligation to make the world better. Do you remember that? And it's not something you fit in between yoga and takeout sushi. And so I became an idealist when I was very young, but I couldn't be an idealist when I was suppressing because I was worried that too much of me would come out. And so and as you heard, I was the first lawyer in Iowa to ever transition genders. So when it all fell apart, I did lose my law firm. It's okay, it all worked out all right. I could have rebuilt it, but I just decided I'm leaving Iowa. Although my legal community in Cedar Rapids, unbelievably supportive. Unbelievably supportive, it really was. And many of my clients, but not all of them. And so I moved up here to start all over. I decided I'm not going to be a lawyer anymore. I'm going to be an idealist, try and make the world better. What I'm doing right now, here standing in front of you, this is my idealism work. Right now, right here. And so I decided I'm going to live fully as me, as a woman who's idealistic. And I am incredibly lucky to be able to do that. So, and the world is, the universe is taking me places that I could never have imagined, like getting elected to the school board in Eastern Carver County. A land of Trump flags and all kinds of stuff. So, but I got elected. Here, go ahead.
I don't have a question, but I have a recommendation. I read the book Becoming Nicole, and I think it's just fantastic because Nicole was an identical twin boy, and she identified at age 2. And so it goes through her whole story and how her parents had to fight for her. And we used this in Eden Prairie as a whole community read, and we had, I can't remember the name of the group, but we had a panel come from a group that dealt with whatever. and there was a mother there who had 2 daughters who were transitioning. And so it was just a real informative and eye-opening situation. But I would really recommend the book, Becoming Nicole. And Nicole Maines is an actress now in Hollywood and had a TV show.
And then after that, read my book.
Thank you. Thank you. Other questions? Yep. We'll get you back there.
Well, it's more a personal story than anything else, but I was listening one time to a pastor, and he was talking, he said, talking about in Genesis, that we're all created equal. And so male and female, we're created equal. We're created in the image of God. And so his point was for us to start looking at people as image bearers of God. Yep. So that kind of stuck in my head, rolled around and rattled around a little bit. And my oldest grandson is gay and loves doing drag. So he's got that persona, and he's got his own name as a drag performer. And he kept asking me to come to these different things, and I don't want to go, blah, 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 whatever. And I finally went. And I wandered around and walked around with my hands in my pocket and felt quite uncomfortable for a while. Then all of a sudden I started saying, I looked at people, looked them right in the eye, and I said, wait a minute, that's an image bearer. And I looked at another one, and that's another image bearer. And I kept doing it. All of a sudden I was smiling, and I was having this great time, and I had one of the best conversations with my grandson, and he's all dressed up as a very attractive woman. And I thought, yeah, I'd date her. And, it makes a difference how we look, and it's not a big deal. All these people have to do a lot of changing in their mind. They have to accept themselves, and it's just a way for us to accept them. And another one thing I want to say before I stop is that the word unity begins with you and I. And it takes us, we all, you and I don't care how straight, how Republican, how Democrat, or how anything we are, unity begins with you and I, and we're the ones that have to make a difference. So.
Thank you for that. That was just great. I really appreciate you sharing that. But what your story reflects, I'm going to guess 15 years ago, you would never have imagined being in a room with a relative, God forbid, a grandson doing drag. Am I right about that? You would never have imagined that. And I'm going to bet 15 years ago you would have said, I'll never do that. That'll never, ever happen. And the reality is that love is an incredibly powerful force. And some of the biggest converts from no to okay are when it's somebody in your family who comes out, whether it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or whatever it is. And And you know, the conversation that we're having tonight, and we're not really having a conversation because I happen to be doing all the talking, I'm sorry about that. But what we're doing tonight, do you understand? We need to do this in America 100,000 times in 100,000 different places. We do. We're going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be bumpy for people. But if we do that, we can get to a place where our country is unbelievably magnificent. But because we're afraid, I fear that that will never ever happen. But that's what it's going to take. It really is. Other questions? I'm watching my time here. Hold on.
I don't think I need the microphone. Oh, okay. Now can you hear me better? Okay. You and I come from very different places politically. I'm sure you've heard that before. But I will start out by saying I'm willing to sit down with you and talk again. We're here for a very practical reason. We have a son and a daughter, both married, and they each have 2 girls. One of them used to be named Jocelyn, who went off to college to northern Arizona and came home and announced that she was now Jonas. And we wrote her a note. We told her we loved her. But I think I speak for both of us when I say, that we love him now. Although that's been hard for us to say. And I came tonight, and I notice there's not very many of us in this room. There's a lot of women, but there's very few guys. I don't know whether that's typical or not. You can answer that if you like. But we're not sure where to go with this. We have not seen him since he announced it and came home a couple of years ago. Not on purpose, just because of COVID and other things. But it's very uncomfortable and very awkward for us. I'm a little bit older than he is. I'm a little bit older than you are. So we have some questions about how you reconcile your opinions, which are opinions, with the Bible, what the Bible says. You're talking in a church. And so I don't know what I'm actually saying other than offering that, because I may not be the only person in the room with a similar situation, and I'm sure you haven't heard it before. I don't intend to take you on as an attorney or as somebody that's gifted and passionate about what they believe and what they say. I still have a lot of questions about it. And so I hope that helps frame it for you so that you can give a response that will be helpful to the audience.
Sure. No, I want to thank you for being brave, and I want to thank you for being vulnerable. I will tell you this. If you go to the last page of the handout, you're going to see that there's a paragraph that says, "My standing offer." And I should have made this offer when I started. I'm a little rusty. And so everywhere I go, I make this offer. I'm willing to meet with any human in a public place for up to an hour, and I don't watch my watch, to talk about anything related to being trans or having a family member who's trans, or simply about surviving the human condition. It has nothing to do with gender or sexuality. I will email me, and I will be happy to meet with you and your wife and talk.
I won't speak for my wife. I learned that a long time ago.
Well, but please, it's a serious offer. It's a real offer, okay? And so please, I'd be happy to chat with you. And you are not alone, okay? And I know that I go to places and people are like, what is this? And some people don't like hearing the things that I have to say. But I will tell you this. In Hastings, 5 years ago at this point, the city issued a proclamation declaring that the city would be welcoming to all humans, people foreign born, LGBTQ+, people of different skin colors, all of that stuff. About 6 weeks after that proclamation was issued, 6 churches and a Christian academy issued a public letter saying, we're good with the proclamation, but we don't want transgender people to come to Hastings because they will harm our children. And so when I found out about that letter, I said, I've got to go to Hastings. And I cannot go anywhere without being invited, just like tonight. I mean, I couldn't call you up and say, hey, I want to come to your church and speak. I have to be invited. And so I finally went. And on a cold November night, in a middle school in Hastings, I spoke to 140 people, many of them from those churches. And I started out my talk just like I started it out tonight, but I continued with a different theme. And I started out the talk saying, I'm no one special. All that I am is simply a survivor of the human condition. And then I said, all of you are also attempting to survive it. Some of you marvelously. Others of you are struggling like hell right now. And then I talked about compassion for humans, for all humans, regardless of who they are. And you know, I got done with that talk because people in the audience started asking me questions that had come from the church. You know, the question like, well, Ellie, you sound like a nice person, but what about the 50-year-old man who suddenly decides he's a 7-year-old girl? What do we do about that? And I'm like, that doesn't happen, okay? It just does not happen. But you know what? We got done with the talk. And people came up to me afterwards, and I waited. I didn't know how it was going to go. And I had people come up to me and say, Ellie, we didn't think it would be like this with you. We thought you were going to come and yell at us and shame us. But you didn't do that. You came and just simply talked to us as humans. And you talked about compassion. And I literally had some of the church people take me up on the offer, because they wanted to talk to me about them being othered in their community because of their religion. And so I believe, we can all get past it. We just have to be brave enough to do it. So that offer, open to everyone. Feel free to take me up on it, okay? And if you're lucky, I'll probably buy your coffee, okay?
I think we might have time for
one more?
one or two more.
Okay, all right, great.
I'm going to go way back here.
Hi, Ellie. Really just a comment. I was raised in church. It expanded me. It squashed me. And I want to say, being here is healing. The fact that I am in church right now with my child, hearing this, it welcomes the divine in a way that's real and true. So thank you, and thank you, Danielle.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to this lovely gentleman. Thank you so much for being brave and standing up and saying your piece. I so appreciate it. I'm assuming you're speaking about Deuteronomy when you're referring to Bible verses.
I wasn't referring to specific Bible verses. I was referring to the Bible.
What I've learned is that you can take the Bible seriously or you can take it literally, but if you take it literally, you can't take it seriously. So many things during these ages were because the civilization was running amok, and some of the outcome for not, behaving in such a way as to take off an ear, pierce a nose, poke an eyeball out. It's different. It was just different. And then as we move into the New Testament and we have Jesus, it turns into inclusiveness and love. So I don't know if that helps or not, but thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate your point of view, but maybe you and I should have come.
Well, and that is actually one thing I want to say in addition to Ellie's offer is that, I think I could speak for Lindy and Dan and Steve certainly and myself that we love talking about theology, and none of us would say we're experts at theology, but we have to have these conversations. And when you said we need these conversations to happen in our country, I think they can start in churches, because I believe that with our commitment to being a community centered on following God for the sake of love and loving others, that we can do this work together. And so that's the kind of community we're called to be, inspiring the world with the inclusive love of Jesus. So more spaces for that. I'm going to take one last one.
Let's do this, John.
Yes.
This person right there.
Okay.
All right, so I'm a gay man. I obviously pass. People think when I had a pickup truck, people thought I was a straight conservative, which is definitely not me. But that's another story entirely. But the reason why talks like this matter and why acceptance matters is I know there's been a lot of news and a lot of negative news this week, but Brianna Gay was a TikTok celebrity YouTuber, I guess. She was a 16-year-old trans woman, and one 15-year-old boy and one 15-year-old girl stabbed her to death in a park in Britain, just in the middle of the day. And police are saying that part of their reason, I guess, for doing it was because of the talk on the news and negative talk, transphobia online. So I just want to thank you for doing this and just say that's, why acceptance really matters to this community.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Okay. Yes, by all means.
Ellie, do you have a final comment that you'd like to make?
Yeah, let me wrap it up. So, first of all, what can you do to help? Okay? I've already told you, please reach out. Tell somebody who's LGBTQ in your life that you care for them, maybe that you love them, that they matter, that they're worthy. All right? Secondly, pay attention to what's going on. We have, anti-LGBTQ legislators, in Minnesota. Don't support them. Speak to people, ask them not to support them. Okay? Thirdly, there are a lot of resources that are on the last page of the document. Support them financially. And lastly, we're in a church, and I just want to talk about the word compassion. I gave a talk 4 years ago to medical professionals, room of about 150 people. It was a Transgender 101 talk, and I got done with the talk. As I was wrapping it up, taking questions, a woman sitting over on this side raised her hand, and she said, "Ellie, you seem like a really nice person, but you're really a man. God doesn't make mistakes, and you just need to get used to it." And what I said to that person was, and it was okay, that was fine that they said that, but what I said to that person, I said, I believe that if Jesus walked through those doors and walked up this aisle, I believe that Jesus would hug me and that he would whisper to me and he would say to me, "I love you." I do that. I believe that. And so please have compassion for all humans, because Jesus was the epitome of compassion. Do I have that right? Yes. And then also, please, have compassion for yourselves, as maybe you're struggling with accepting somebody in your life who's LGBTQ. Maybe you're worried about a conversation you might have with someone. Give yourself a break and let compassion, as long as it is your North Star, as long as it is, we will get there. Thank you so very much for being here.
As Ellie mentioned, she brought some books. So if you'd like to stay and pick up a book or have a conversation, you may do that. I'm going to close this in a prayer. Thank you all so much for coming, for doing the hard work, the hard and holy work, I will say, of leaning into these justice conversations over the last 4 weeks. So God, we thank you for this series. We thank you for Ellie, for her story, for her courage, for the ways that she has pressed us outside of our comfort zones, that the ways that she's invited us to think more deeply, to love those we are in relationship with, and to love those we're not in relationship with, oh God. And so we pray that we could rise to the task, that we could receive your love for the sake of giving it out to the world, to all humans everywhere. And so God, please build that compassion in us. In Jesus' name, amen.